Good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Gabriel O'Hara. I'm a meteorologist with the National Weather Service in Phoenix. So I'll give you a presentation on what we've been seeing in terms of the temperatures and what can we expect going forward. Um, so um, so on this past Tuesday, we actually ended our longest streak of consecutive days of 100 plus degrees high temperatures here in Phoenix. So that record was 113 days. Obviously, shattering the record that was previously 76 days, which was last set in 1993. So luckily we broke that consecutive day streak on Tuesday when we had highs in the lower to middle 90s across the Phoenix area. And so as you can see, you probably know about this, but this summer obviously was the hottest on record. We broke the number of days of 110 plus degrees high temperatures. So that was 61 degrees. That broke the previous record set last year, 55 days. We also broke another record, which was the number of days of 90 plus degrees low temperatures as well. And that also broke the record from last year as well. So this year got worse. We thought 2023 was bad. Well, this year was worse, unfortunately. And so obviously, as I mentioned, 2024 was the hottest summer on record. Um, breaking the record from set last year, but as you can see, it broke that record by almost 2 degrees Fahrenheit. So we had 61 days of at least 110-degree high temperatures, 39, 39 days where overnight lows were 90 plus degrees, and then we obviously broke that record consecutive number of days of 100 plus degree high temperatures. Record hottest June. So that's why 2024, shattered that 2023 record, because we had the hottest June on record. That was part of the reason. If you recall, last 2023, we actually had a below normal June, but then July and August, were really hot. And so this year, the difference is that we had a more prolonged stretch of really hot temperatures. Last year, the issue is that we had many more days of 115 degrees plus high temperatures. So that's where the difference, lies in terms of why the average temperature this year was higher than last year, because we had a more prolonged stretch of really hot temperatures. And then, with that, we had 9 days where record high temperatures were either broken or tied. And then we also had 19 days where record warm low temperatures were either broken or tied. So that obviously was a factor as to why this year became, the hottest summer on record. And so as you can see with this trend, you can see here that many days, so basically almost every day, we had above normal temperatures throughout the summer. So you can actually see here with these, line bar lines here. You can actually see that is that every day we had above normal temperatures, with some days actually breaking, those records. So in terms of 115 plus degree days, so the average last day of that is July 22nd, and then the latest is September 5th. So obviously, we're safe from having to deal that with again this year, the rest of this year. Also with 110 plus degree days, the latest 110 degree plus day it was September 19th. We're not going to see that again this year, luckily. And then 100 and plus 5 degree days, we still can see, that still the rest of this year. So probably, through October, we still could see that. And then obviously, 100 plus degree high temperatures day, we're still going to see that. In fact, the forecast does call for temperatures once again to get above the triple digits as we head into the weekend and into next week. And then you can actually see that here. So for the next, couple of days through Saturday, our temperatures here in Phoenix should still remain below 100 degrees for high temperatures. And then as we head into starting on Sunday and then continuing into at least the middle of next week, we can see that those temperatures will start to jump up once again above the triple digit mark. And then you can actually see those probabilities. So starting on Sunday, you can see that those probabilities really climb above 85 to 90%. And then with the heat risk, we can see that the next through Monday, our heat risk levels are going to be in the minor category. But then once we see those temperatures start to approach near 105 degrees once again by Tuesday and Wednesday, that heat risk level will actually go up into the moderate category. So unfortunately, even though we saw this, relief in terms of these, excessively hot temperatures, we're still not done yet. So as you recall, last year, our last 100-degree high temperatures actually was back on October 20th. So we still can see 100-degree plus high temperatures well into October. And then for the Tucson area, temperatures are actually going to remain in the 90s. So not expecting triple-digit heat for Tucson through the next week, and that will keep the heat risk levels in the minor category. And then you can actually see here, spatial coverage of the heat risk. So you can see that through Saturday, we can see that those heat risk levels stay in the minor category, but then we can see a greater aerial coverage of moderate heat risk starting on Sunday, and then that continues into early next week. And then taking a look at the longer range, so this is what the Climate Prediction Center came out with today. You can actually see that the trend is going to be for above normal temperatures to continue potentially into the first week of October. And then there's a slight tendency for below normal precipitation as well, unfortunately. And then if we take a look in the seasonal outlook, so if we go through the rest of the fall and then into the winter, we can actually see that there's going to be a tendency for above normal temperatures, as well as continued drier than normal conditions. And so the main factor as to why there's like an enhanced probability of below normal temperatures as we head into the below normal precipitation, as we head into the fall into the winter, is because of the developing La Nina in the equatorial Pacific. When we have La Nina conditions, usually our winters tend to be warmer than normal as well as drier to normal. So obviously that's not always the case, but for most of La Nina winters, that's been the case of above normal temperatures and below normal precipitation. So unfortunately, if we're looking for more rainfall, the outlook just doesn't look that good for any above normal precipitation into early next year, at least.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me. I work a lot with Mr. Hondula and do what he asks. So we are pleased on the City of Phoenix's behalf. If you're familiar with the Phoenix region, there is a Valley Metro brand name that we use on the regional transit system, and that goes for bus and light rail and things like Dial-A-Ride and a couple other things. And what a lot of folks don't know is that behind the scenes, City of Phoenix operates a little over half of that service. But we put the Valley Metro branding on it just like everyone else does. So basically, City of Phoenix provides a bus service in the core of the region, Phoenix proper, and a couple of other adjacent cities, and then the west side of town. And then Valley Metro takes care of the East Valley and then a handful of commuter bus routes that come in from the corners. We do the rapid routes, which come into downtown Phoenix, and then Valley Metro does the express routes. Not as much frequency, but come from further out. So that's kind of what we do. We have 3 garages, a fleet of 625 vehicles. We are a small City of Phoenix department, 127 positions, but most of our service is contracted out. So it's about 2,200 local jobs. And 2/3 of our fleet operates on compressed natural gas. And then the other 1/3 is biodiesel. And we just got our first fleet of 20 hybrid buses that we're kicking the tires and putting it on the street. And then about a year from now, we'll be kicking the tires on all new technology for us, which will be battery electric, plug in just like a Tesla, and then hydrogen fuel cell electric, which operates very similar to our compressed natural gas. So all new stuff for us, but you guys are interested in what are we doing from a passenger's perspective, and I believe transit system employee perspective relative to heat and keeping people safe and getting messages out, correct? I think that's kind of in a nutshell. So
Yep, yep.
I will share a couple of things, and you guys can shout something, raise a hand, throw something at your screen. I'll try to catch it. But feel free to poke and prod and ask questions. I've only been doing this for 20 years almost. So I'm going to share my screen, which will be my web browser. Can you guys see that?
Yep, just came up. Thank you.
So you should see a news article that we did back in July about shade. Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, that's what's up.
Perfect. Okay, so I'll kind of, again, tell you guys what we're doing, and then, feel free to ask questions. So City of Phoenix's transit service is funded mostly locally with a transit tax we call T2050. And that is a local 7/10 of a cent sales tax that Phoenix, if you buy something in Phoenix, I'm getting 7 cents for every $100 you spend. No, I'm sorry, 7 cents for every 70 cents for every $100 you spend. I'm sorry, I did the math wrong. And it goes 86% of that goes to transit, and 13%, 14% goes 86% to transit, 14% to streets. So what are we doing with that money? Aside from expanding bus service in terms of frequency and hours, we are also building light rail. If you live in Tempe, Phoenix, Mesa, downtown area, that's going on. But the other thing, of course, that we're doing is shade. So we put this article out in July when we do it every couple of years, relative to keeping the public informed on what are we doing with, that money you all are giving us. So in this example, this latest example, we show what are we doing relative to shade. We have been doing about 80 new bus stops, shaded bus stops a year. And so I'll give you a little bit of background. Throughout Phoenix proper, we have about 4,100 bus stops. About 75% are currently shaded. And what you see here is an example of what we are doing to put shade out. Now, a couple of years ago, we partnered with ASU's School of Industrial Design to come up with some different designs that might fit a bigger or smaller footprint. So those are some of the newer ones that you're seeing. But this is kind of a garden variety of what we're doing. And let's see. This is a little infographic that accompanied the article that shows what have we done since 2018. So the local tax we have been collecting since 2016, but this chart we only went back to 2018. And as you can see there, it kind of ebbed and flowed. Our aim has always been about 80 a year, but we had a couple years pre and post COVID where either due to materials or manpower, we fell a little short. But then in 2002, we kind of upped our game. 2023, we upped our game. And I think this year we'll end up with between 80 or 90. And as you can see there, what I said earlier, out of our approximately 4,000 bus stops, right now we're about at 75% shaded. And we get asked a lot, well, how do you decide where they go? We look at ridership. All of our ridership is geocoded, so we can see where people are getting on and off and making transfers, either between routes or between modes. So that's where we're putting them. We also put them in places where they make sense. We have to be ADA compliant. So we have to have a landing pad for walkers and wheelchairs. We have to have connectivity with sidewalks and the like. So we inspect every place that we're going to put a bus stop before we actually place it, to make sure it makes sense and to make sure it's ADA compliant. The other thing that we do in partnership with Valley Metro, and this is the Valley Metro webpage, but a lot of stuff that's done here is by member cities, other agencies such as the county. We put out all of the stay safe and, heat relief information. So we have, some kid stuff, some coloring books, some fun safety, but we also have super important information like the cooling centers, the respite centers. We've put some extra some extra shade along light rail construction corridors, things like that. So we've put all of that information here on one page, as well as some health tips and kind of, so know before you go stuff for our riders. The other thing that we've done that you see here in the middle is track your vehicle. In 2001, we put out for the first time an app so that and I highly recommend folks download this and play with it. It's super fun. Basically, you download the Valley Metro app, and when you go to the trip planning function, it recognizes where you are through your phone's GPS, and it shows you everything around you transit-wise. So it'll pop up the streets next to you and around you, and it'll show bus stops, light rail platforms, and then it will show live data of where vehicles are, both bus and rail. So a couple of years ago, I take the Rapid, for example, to North Phoenix. I would have to go out to the corner of a couple streets here downtown, and I would have to rely on the schedule saying it's going to come by at 5 o'clock, for example. What I can do now is I can open the app and it will tell me how far away the next bus stop is from my favorited bus stops. And I can do the same thing with light rail. So in our opinion, that helps folks, especially during the peak of the summer. You no longer have to go out and wait at the bus stop for X minutes. You can literally go in there and you can tell the app, here are my favorite routes or bus stops. And then it'll tell you, there's a bus stop 7 minutes away, 10 minutes away, or whatever it might be. Because buses, just like vehicles, are subject to wrecks and street restrictions and freeway closures and things like that. So in the old days when we had the schedule, you had to cross your fingers and hope it got there at that time. Now you can open the app and it tells you how far away it is from your stop. I think that's really cool. And then we have water distribution events here through September 30th as well. And again, this is under the Valley Metro brand name, but we're all kind of working together to either fund it or support it or directly put out services. The other thing that we're doing is keeping riders cool we have a lot of community partnerships, especially in the South Central corridor where we're building bus stops. We've partnered with local businesses and an art gallery or two, if I remember correctly, to put out water and shade structures. So along the alignment where South Central Light Rail is being built, we put out temporary shade, because when we build light rail, it's a lot of work. You've probably seen, we have to take out curb, gutter, sidewalk, lighting. The big heavy lift in light rail is relocating the underground utilities. And so bus stops are temporarily removed. So what we've done in the South Central corridor is that we've done water distribution and we've done temporary bus stops along the construction alignment. And then the last thing I'll mention is City of Phoenix. You may have heard, I don't know if David's covered this before. As of this year, we have a ordinance, a heat mitigation ordinance that applies to our contractors. As I said earlier, all of our services contracted out. So those 625 vehicles that we have operating from 3 garages, those are contracted employees. They're not city employees, but they're doing service on our behalf. And we have this city council approved heat ordinance that basically says we have to have, or contractors have to have, drinking water. They have to have brake availability, air conditioning vehicles or buildings, acclimatization practices, heat plans for their employees, and it has to be delivered to all employees in a easy to understand format. And then our job as owners of the contractor, as owners of the contract, are to look over the contractor's shoulder and make sure they're doing what they're supposed to. So we actually have 2 to 3 employees at every garage that will walk around and make sure that these things are getting done. And I'll tell you, you know, one thing that we do in anticipation of every summer is we have campaigns. You know, we get the vehicles ready because as soon as it starts hitting 107, 110, 115, whatever it might be, just like your cars that break down in the extreme heat or cold, same thing happens to buses. And we have 625 of them. So, you know, multiply whatever you go through with your personal vehicle by 625, and that's what we have to deal with. So I kind of talked really quick, but I don't know how much time I had. But in a nutshell, that's what we have.
In September of last year, we knew we had some projects coming. We've been asked multiple times to look at adding shade to stops, primarily tree shade, because we find that trees are really cool to have, but then you have conflict with, you know, who's gonna maintenance, trim them, make sure people can walk. Brian Conte, who's our facilities manager, also helped us with this project. And let's see, there we go. So what we did was we went out, we knew it was hot still, summer. Oh, you can't see my screen. Ooh, let's try again. How's that? Much better?
There you go. I think it just came up.
Okay. Let me go back. Sorry, other direction. Technical, you would think I would know. So here's a picture of Mackenzie and Brian Conti, our director of facilities, as I mentioned. I don't think my picture is in here at all, so I'm really happy. What we did last year was we went out and did some temperature measurements at some stops because we've been looking at how we can make some changes. We limited funding. Where can we make the most change? So we went to 4 different stops. They are, for those of you that know Tucson, they're not far from each other. We find that different parts of Tucson have different temperatures because of elevation changes or how much is built up. So we wanted to get 4 or 5 stops in a similar area with similar conditions for what's been developed or not development. When we were on MLK Junior Way, there was the new buildings that you see now weren't there. So we were pretty much in a clean slate. Obviously, it won't surprise anybody, but the stop that we went to, and I will try to give you a picture here real quick, that had the highest temperatures. Ground temperature was 124 degrees. The ambient temperature was 108. And as you can see from this picture, it was all gravel. There's no shade, there's no buildings, there's nothing. And that was the temperatures that we were receiving. However, the more vegetation we had, the better the ground temperature was, the better that the ambient temperature was. And so it was kind of interesting for us to see how just tree shade. So this is the stop at 6th Avenue and 29th Street, just a little tree shade. And it happened that this stop is on the west side, so it was getting the benefit of the sun from the west side. Both the ground temperature and the ambient temperature were low. Granted, it's still over 100 degrees, but I will tell you it made a difference when we were walking to the stops between walking on the pavement and standing in the cooler shade. And it's crazy that I would say 107 was cool. I usually tell people, yes, we have a dry heat, as we all joke around about Tucson, but 105 or anything greater is not that easy. But it made a significant change. And the last picture I want to show you real quick while we're looking at it. Sorry, I'm trying to do two screens at once so I can show you the pictures because we didn't get them into the slideshow. This is on ML King Drive, and it's the Tucson Marketplace, but you can see all the shade is behind the stop. It's not up against the stop. It's actually a little higher elevation, but it shades the stop really nicely. And it was actually really good ambient temperature, but the ground temperature was still great. So this is where we started. We're gonna go back when it gets cool and take temperatures again. But what came out of this was Fatima Luma, who's our Chief Resilient Officer here in Tucson, at the City of Tucson in the City Manager's Office, contacted us and said, hey, we've got some money. We would like to do a pilot project doing really great stops. And can you find us some stops? So we chose 6 different stops. This covers the different wards in the City of Tucson. They all have a shelter right now, but they don't have anything around the stops. And so we're going to be doing a project with these. We do have temperatures before, and we're going to do temperature checks after. And this is where we're working towards. This is kind of a mock-up. It's not that, it's exciting because it's a mock-up, but I think it'll be a little bit more vegetation than what you see here. But it's a sheltered stop. As you saw on the previous slide, when we had just a little bit of vegetation around a sheltered stop, that brought the temperature down significantly enough compared to the ground temperature. And I didn't tell you that day that we were out temperature checking happened to be the hottest day of the month, and it was over 109 degrees at the airport. So we weren't out there obviously on a day like today, which was only 90 degrees. We were out at probably the hottest part of the year, I think. The maintenance. So what we're looking at doing is a bus stop, adding some solar. We are going to be working with City of Tucson Emergency Services. As Jesus mentioned, bus stops, we have lots of EMS showing up at bus stops. So we're going to have an emergency call box where somebody can get to customer service during regular business hours, and then emergency services in the evening if they need to contact that EMS team. And then having the vegetation around, we will be using green stormwater infrastructure. And we're working with Nicole Gillette in our urban forestry program, and also the landscape architect with DTM. And I would say David's last name, but I don't want to mess it up. What's really cool about this pilot project that we're doing and going out and taking temperatures before and after is, well, taking temperatures before and after helped us identify where we needed to do and how we could make the stops much better. This pilot project is going to be great because we also happen to win, is our 4th grant we've applied for to improve our bus stops. First one that we received, $11.4 million from FTA to improve our 80 stops. So our pilot stops will actually be in place this year. We'll be able to take temperatures, see how it changes, and everything we've learned about getting ready for this pilot and the pilot itself will help us execute our grant. So the stops will be very similar. They all have green storm infrastructure. They all have some solar lighting. They all have the emergency services kiosk. So I'm hoping that makes a difference. And then we'll be able to do another case study of, okay, here's where we started taking temperatures and seeing what worked. This is what we were able to implement. And now how can we go further? And we don't have the 75% of shelter coverage that Phoenix has, but we're getting there. We're over 50%, and these extra 80 stops will, depending on the ward, will bump us up a little bit higher. And then we'll also be doing ADA accessibility for all 2,200 bus stops, Sunlink stops, in the city of Tucson and the region, and some bus lifts to help keep our buses going. We already have started working on our battery electric buses, and we have the first 10. You see them on the street, and next year we're expecting another 10. So by the end of next year, we'll have 20. And also our fleet just finally converted, last 39 buses that were diesel are being replaced next year as well. So our fleet will be completely compressed natural gas and battery electric buses. And I'm looking forward to hearing about what Phoenix is doing with that hydrogen cell when they get those on board. And I think we only had 4 slides. That's the end of it. My information is there, and Mackenzie's as well.
Great, thank you, Davida. Any questions for Davida? Guess I could ask a similar question. Is there any, so this one pilot project sounds pretty exciting. Are there any other initiatives related to kind of thinking through heat that SunTrans working on?
Well, it's not a pilot per se. We are working with Fatima and her team, and they've already mapped the cooling stations that the city of Tucson has put in place, and we're working with them to make sure that there's information on the buses and at the different stops, especially those 6, that will be more information about heat resiliency, how to protect yourself in the community, and making sure people know how to get to the cooling stations. All the cooling stations that the city of Tucson have put in place are at least 1 bus route, and there's up to 3 bus routes that are nearby within a quarter-mile walking distance. So a couple of them are a little farther away, but they're all pretty accessible to transit. So we've been really fortunate to work with the city on, working with the heat resiliency, working with the storm to shade team, making sure how we can keep our trees on the street as well, especially around bus stops.
Yeah, great, thank you. I was thinking of the cooling center kind of overlay work that we've all been doing to make sure that they're all accessible by different transit routes. So
yeah, and so Mackenzie, I don't know if she wants to tell you about it or just let me. She had a really cool experience when the Swiftwell team was down, and they were going out and taking temperatures, follow the LiDAR temperatures on the vehicle. So we've been following the heat issues for a while and seeing what we can do to make it better in Tucson. We have a lot of people, we're not as hot as Phoenix, as was said earlier, but that doesn't mean that it's not kind of dangerous heat that we do have.